Wow, I cannot believe we are already midway through 2025. What a year it's been. Um, and so I have some slides to share kind of as an enhancement from the email, talking about or just sort of looking at year-to-date performance, both here at home in the US and abroad. So taking a look at the U.S. compared to the rest of the world, as of June 30th, U.S. markets up just roughly about 6% versus international emerging markets or developing markets up 16, developed markets up 20, and then Europe up about 23 and a half. So a very interesting year. Um, if we think about the low in April after quote unquote Liberation Day, where U.S. markets, the S&P was down roughly 15, Nasdaq was down about 21%. By contrast, international markets were down about 4%. Developed international markets were down about 4. So not down nearly as much, and then really since then have had significant outperformance relative to the U.S. If we look at things through the lens of by country, we can see, once again, here's the US, and then sort of looking across the spectrum, Germany being the top performer, up about 35%, Brazil at 27, France at 21, China up almost 19%, our friends in Canada up about 14. So just kind of all around from a global perspective, significant outperformance around the world year to date. And it's kind of interesting if we think about what the capital markets look like from an equity perspective 15 years ago, where the U.S. was at the time 43% of the sort of global aggregate, versus today where it's 65%. And so, the thing I think a couple of things to really bear in mind. I think U.S. exceptionalism and outperformance is still very much there's still merit and it's warranted. We're still the global leader in terms of technology and innovation, but that doesn't mean that other parts of the world aren't trying to catch up or haven't caught up in certain respects. And so that's one factor. And then the other is just cost. The US, by relative comparison, is more expensive. So, back then the S&P 500 trading at 15 times earnings versus today trading at 23 times earnings. So just by comparison, international markets are a little bit more attractive from a cost perspective. And that's certainly played a role in how things have worked out in 2025. This is as of the end of 2024. So here we have the US. This is just equity markets, capital markets, publicly traded capital markets. And so we see the US, to the point of the previous slide, being, the lion's share of the global landscape. It's worth noting that, our next closest, quote unquote competitor would be Japan at 5% here. China's at 3, India's at 2. Here you have France at 2, the UK at 3, Germany at 2. So, just by relative comparison, we are just such a more significant player in terms of the equity landscape. And then the final piece of this is here you have Apple at approximately 4%. So if we think about the top 10 companies in the S&P 500 or the Mag 7, you effectively have a third of the U.S. market is those 10 companies. Or put another way, Apple is basically France and Germany combined from an equity market standpoint. So just pretty fascinating to think about. Thought it would be helpful to look under the hood a little bit of both the developed market and emerging market indices. So starting with the MSCI EFI index, effectively developed markets around the world, excluding US and Canada, roughly $18 trillion of exposure, with Japan making up roughly 22%, UK at 15, France at 11, Germany at 10, Switzerland at almost 10%. And then broad sector exposure. So a little bit different than the US where we're tech heavy. When we look at the developed markets, we see roughly 24% in financials, 19% in industrials, 11% in healthcare, 9% in IT. So, just a bit of a different composition than what we have here at home in the U.S. And then we look at some of these names, the top 10 names: SAP, ASML, Nestle, Novartis. These are very diverse brands with global footprints, and I think it's just worth appreciating just the breadth that we see in the developed international markets, and from banking with HSBC to gas and petroleum with Shell, technology, ASML in the chip making space, and SAP, Roche and AstraZeneca, Novartis in healthcare, and of course Nestle is everything from coffee creamer to baby food to dog food to ice cream to pizza. Just a tremendous amount of diversification from a global perspective, and then sort of similarly with the emerging markets. China making up of course, the biggest, almost a third at 28%, Taiwan at 19, India just behind it at 18%, and Korea at almost 11%, Brazil at about 4.5%. And then again, not only from a technology standpoint, Taiwan Semiconductor, Samsung Electronics, Tencent Holdings, but it's kind of interesting to note with some of these companies. Tencent is an interesting example where Tencent is in the payment space like a PayPal, but then they also have a social media presence in sort of the way that Facebook is. And so in some cases, countries in the developing world, or companies in the developing world, are even more diverse than some of their U.S. counterparts like Amazon. So just worth appreciating, both from a developing world standpoint and the developed world standpoint, just what things look like, and how that's contributing to global growth from a capital market perspective. And then thinking about diversification more broadly, beyond just stocks and international stocks and domestic, but just looking across the spectrum year to date. We see, of course, what I've just finished talking about: international, emerging, but then commodities up roughly 7%. TIPS, Treasury, inflation protected securities are up about 4.5%. Bonds are up about 3.5%. So really, it's just been U.S. small cap stocks that have lagged or underperformed year to date. Everything else is in positive territory and generally looks pretty good. So I think that's a nice place to be at mid-year. So just to kind of wrap things up. Hopefully this sort of underscores the importance and value of being broadly diversified. And I think since it is the 4th of July holiday weekend, it's a great time to appreciate our independence and what makes America a pretty wonderful place to live, but also the fact that we are all connected ultimately, and that there are benefits to our global diversification. And then last but not least, one of my summer songs that I'm enjoying by Drew and Ellie Holcomb, a song called Memory Bank. And, just enjoy it, listen to it, and yeah, put some money in the memory bank. Until next time.